Hey guys, and welcome back to EQ Planes. And today, not only will I be reviewing the American Airlines 777-200 in economy, but also telling the kind of crazy story that went in behind this. As due to an unlucky combination of both weather delays and mechanical failures, it resulted in me flying to Dallas just to spend 6 hours there and fly the 7 hours back again. Without further ado, let's get right into this video. Unlike most of the trip reports that I filmed, this trip report actually starts the night before at Kahului Airport, where I was waiting to board my WestJet 737 MAX 8 to Vancouver. After our boarding time came and went, they informed us that our aircraft had been delayed for a mechanical issue. Eventually, after about an hour and a half of waiting, they came and told us that there was a problem with the APU on the aircraft. After about another hour and a half passed by, they told us that they don't have the part that they need for the APU to be fixed on the island, and that the flight would have to be cancelled tonight. For me, this certainly wasn't the end of the world, as I did have accommodations in Maui and I'd only end up missing the first day of school. At this point, I was assuming that WestJet would book me on one of their many flights from Kahului to Calgary the next day, as Calgary was originally my end destination with them anyways. However, the next day I saw that they had booked me with American Airlines from Kahului to Dallas and then from Dallas to Calgary. Likely because the WestJet flights between Maui and Canada are usually quite full, so they may not have had a spot for me on one of those planes. However, it did strike me as odd that they had booked me with American Airlines and not one of the airlines that they're partnered with, like Delta. However, with that being said, I was originally quite happy with this arrangement, as it would give me a chance to review American Airlines, which I haven't flown for quite some time, and also give me a chance to fly on the Boeing 777, which is one of the few Boeing jets that I haven't flown on before. But now, with all that being said, let's talk about the check-in experience at American Airlines. This is when I realized that things may not go so well, as the boarding pass for my flight between Dallas and Calgary seemed to have trouble printing. They said that there was a massive winter storm in Dallas and that a lot of flights were cancelled out of Dallas that day. In the end, they weren't able to print the boarding pass, however, they recommended that I still continue on to Dallas. As they said, there's a chance that the flight still may go, and worst case scenario, they could put me on the flight tomorrow. So after discussing it with some other people, I decided to take American Airlines' recommendation and fly to Dallas, certainly hoping for the best for that flight between Dallas and Calgary, as that flight was also scheduled to be on the Piedmont Retrojet, which would have been really cool to fly. But now, with that being said, let's talk about Kahalui's airport. The airport is set up in one big line and is split in the middle by a big eating area. I've flown through this airport many times and I've definitely never really had any complaints about it. There are some areas where you can stand out in the open air, and it generally provides pretty good views of the aircraft sitting at gates. However, one thing that I do find a tad annoying is the agricultural inspection you need to go through every time you go from the main eating area to one of the gate areas. I wish they would put that just at the end of security so that you would only need to do it once instead of several times. Another interesting thing was seeing the WestJet 737 MAX registered Charlie Foxtrot November Alpha X-ray, which was supposed to take me to Vancouver yesterday, sitting at a remote stand. Anyways, here's our aircraft today, an American Airlines 777-200ER registered November 789 Alpha November. This particular aircraft was built in 2001, being 22 years old, and sports the Royce engines. I'm really excited to be flying the 777 today, as this is the only Boeing wide-body which I haven't flown on before. I'm also happy to be flying the 200ER in particular, as along with the 200 and 300, it is considered an original generation 777. Being part of that original generation means it doesn't have the extended wingtips on it, and also is able to sport the Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney engines, while the second generation of 777s consisting of the 200LR and 300ER can only support the GE90s. So considering the fact that I'll most likely fly a second generation 777 at some point, it's nice to have an opportunity to fly on this original generation first. But now, let's get ready to board onto the aircraft. Boarding certainly went quickly today, as the flight was almost completely empty. I'll also note that while standing in line, I also noticed that some other people from the flight the day before were also booked onto this plane, so definitely wasn't the only one in this same situation. But anyways, now as we walk through the cabin, let's take this opportunity to talk about American Airlines' seating configuration. Starting out with business class is laid out in a 1x2x1 configuration with a total of 37 seats. Behind that, there are 24 premium economy seats in a 2x4x2 configuration, finally followed by economy in a 3x4x3 configuration, seating over 212 people. My seat for today will be seat 28, which is in a special section of the economy cabin called Main Cabin Extra. I'll get into more detail about the perks of that later into the video. I'd also like to recommend not sitting in row 18, as row 18 does not have a window in economy. When it comes to my first impressions of the 777, it definitely feels like a 767-787 hybrid, with the large overhead bins and tall ceilings like the Dreamliner, but without some of the other fancy features. Another thing that caught my eye was the pattern that American Airlines has on the walls, which I'm definitely a big fan of. I like it when airlines put these small little details onto their aircraft. The aircraft did also feature pretty strong mood lighting, which I'll talk more about later in the flight. Another thing that was interesting to note was just how powerful the air vents were on this aircraft. Most of the time on airplanes, the air vents tend to be pretty weak and you don't get much out of it. However, on the 777, they seem to be really strong, which I like. Also, as I stated earlier, the flight was pretty empty, so not only did I get a whole row to myself, but almost everybody on the plane got a whole row to themselves, and I had nobody behind me or in front of me as well. But now I'll shortly leave you with what might be one of the most beautiful sunset takeoffs I've ever seen out of Maui, and we'll get into more detail about the product when we're in the air. Now that we're in the air, let's take a closer look at the seats. Now, although this is a main cabin extra seat, these are the exact kind of seats that feature in normal economy as well, albeit with extra legroom. Although, with that being said, I still found the legroom quite restrictive. I'm 6'2" for reference and can't imagine that the regular economy seats would have been that comfortable. The seats did also offer a universal power outlet along with USB charging ports below the IFE screen. When it comes to the padding on the seat, it certainly wasn't anything special, but definitely wasn't uncomfortable either. The recline on the seat was also pretty average, and the seats did also feature adjustable headrests. The tray table was also of average size and a decent height above the knees for me as well. So overall, the seat is pretty mid. My only real complaint about it is the legroom, especially considering that this is an extra legroom seat. If you're over 6 feet, would definitely recommend an exit row where you'll get even more legroom. And I'll just quickly mention that the back seat pocket had your standard safety card, air sickness bag, and in-flight menu. I'd also like to take a moment to highlight some of the subtle differences between the normal economy experience and the main cabin plus economy experience. Now, as I already stated, the economy seats themselves are the exact same, however you do get that little bit of extra legroom I was talking about. Along with that, you also get free alcoholic drinks, however I'm under 21, so I would not be taking advantage of that today. It also gives you access to the ability to pay for an upgrade if you want to. And on top of that, you get to board before other economy passengers, meaning that you get first dibs on overhead bin space. So with that being said, the benefits certainly are minuscule, however it is certainly not much of an upgrade cost, being about $50, however price may vary. So it will certainly end up depending on the person on whether or not it's worth it or not. When it comes to in-flight entertainment on board this aircraft, Wi-Fi is available along with streaming through the American Airlines app. Along with that, the built-in IFE systems are pretty good. They're of a pretty normal size, nothing super special there. However, they are pretty responsive, and there are certainly plenty of options in terms of movies and games. All the IFE systems also seem to have privacy screen protectors on them, which for me is a win. However, if you do plan on watching the same movie with somebody on the same screen, you may find it a little bit annoying if you're sitting in the other seat. Another interesting kind of quirk to this system is that it came with a remote, which, to be honest, I've never seen on any other economy IFE system before. It wasn't really super useful, however I did like the fact that you could press the lights on and off just on the remote. Another thing that kind of impressed me about this experience was the food service that they offered. It was just a brownie, chips, a sandwich, and a drink. However, that's certainly much more than I've gotten on other airlines in the past on flights of similar lengths. So overall, definitely really impressed with that. I'll also like to mention that the service from the American Airlines cabin crew and their ground service as well was definitely pretty good. In the past, I found that American Airlines' customer service was always kind of something that was a drawback with them. However, I think they've seemed to fix those issues. I also did take advantage of having the full row to myself and transformed it into almost a kind of bed of sorts. Was definitely a pretty comfortable way to spend the flight. So after having a couple hours nap on the airplane, let's move to the loo review. The lavatory certainly was pretty clean, however I found that it was very cramped, especially for a wide body. I find the bathrooms on the 737 MAX are even better than this, so it was definitely a bit of a low point for the experience. However, in my opinion, the bathrooms don't usually make or break the experience anyways, so not a huge problem, I guess. Now when it comes to the 777 as an aircraft, although I think the aircraft looks really cool, I will say I think it is the least comfortable of all the Boeing wide bodies. The 777 has a very tight 10 abreast seating configuration. Now although the 777 was designed with 9 abreast seating in mind, airlines found out that they could manage to fit in 10 abreast and still be okay. However, that bit of an extra squeeze resulted in the 777 seats being narrower than all the seats on the other Boeing wide bodies. So barring a few exceptions, you can expect the 777 to have narrower seats than really any other wide-body aircraft. So if it's between a 777 and an aircraft like the A330, 767, or 787 Dreamliner, I would definitely recommend taking one of those over the 777. I'll also mention that American Airlines did a pretty good job with the mood lighting on this flight, definitely making the aircraft feel a little newer than 22 years old. Also, if you've enjoyed the video so far, please consider subscribing for more aviation content. Now enjoy the snowy early morning arrival and landing into Dallas-Fort Worth. And be sure to stick around for not only my final thoughts on the aircraft, but what ended up causing me to fly all the way back to Maui just 6 hours later. Now, let's talk about my final thoughts on this flight and American Airlines in general. In terms of the product on board, I found it to be very average. Certainly wasn't awful, but wasn't really anything special either. However, when it comes to American Airlines' service, I actually found that to be very good and much improved since my last flight with them in 2016. The staff were definitely friendly, accommodating, and they did their best to deal with the situation at hand. And from an operational point of view, I think American Airlines actually handled the situation very well, given that Dallas had more canceled flights than any other airport in the world that day, as they were able to do something for me rather than nothing. But yeah, in general, I think the airline has really matured and improved over this past 7 years since I've flown them last. But anyways, now let's take a look at a situation on the ground in Dallas here. When I had arrived, my flight to Calgary had been cancelled, so I went to the American Airlines counter to see what I could do for rebooking. So when I got to the counter, American Airlines gave me two options. Either they could book me onto the flight tomorrow, which had one seat left on it, or for free of charge, they could fly me right back to Maui on the next flight. So in the end, I decided it'd be best to fly back to Maui, as in Maui I did have free accommodations and in Dallas I did not. It also looked like the storm would stay in Dallas for the next couple days, meaning that the flight they would book me on to Calgary would most likely be cancelled anyways. And in hindsight, that was definitely the best decision to make, as the flight that they offered to rebook me on to Calgary the next day was also cancelled, meaning there was a chance I'd be stuck paying for a hotel in Dallas for longer than I would like. But anyways, with that all being said and done, here's the next aircraft I'll be flying right back to Maui, being another American Airlines 777-200ER registered November 778 Alpha November. The flight would end up being delayed a couple hours as there was a flight attendant they were waiting on. And once again, the flight definitely was pretty empty. On the way back, I'd spent almost 10 hours aboard the aircraft rather than the 7 hours it took me to get there, not only because of a headwind, but also the fact that it took us over an hour to de-ice. But in the end, to be honest, I actually kind of enjoyed the experience. However, if I wasn't an av geek, and had I not had any accommodations in Maui, this definitely would have been a bit more of a sour experience. I did also have the luxury of having a full row to myself on both the way there and the way back, making the experience much more comfortable than it would have been otherwise. And for those of you wondering how I got to Calgary in the end, I did end up booking a direct Air Canada flight from Kahului to Calgary when I got back to Maui. I won't be making a trip report on that flight, but overall it was also a pretty positive experience considering I got a full row to myself despite the flight being almost full, and a free meal since I'm under 18 and was traveling on my own. Anyways, thank you guys for watching and sticking around till the end of the video. Hope to see you guys back next time.